The sea is a mirror. It shows you who you are when the world turns dark. I've stood on decks that groaned under the weight of storms, felt the salt burn my skin, and heard the wind howl promises it never kept. My name is the Billionaire Fisherman, and I've sailed through more than waves. I've sailed through life. The ocean doesn't give you gold on a platter. It dares you to dig it from the depths. Today I'll tell you a story that's carved into my bones. A tale of a man named Jacob, who sank lower than the seabed and rose higher than the tallest mast. This isn't just his story. It's a map for anyone brave enough to follow. Sit down, let the tide roll in, and listen. Jacob came into this world with nothing but the sound of the sea in his ears. His mother was a widow, his father a ghost claimed by a storm years before. They lived in a shack on a jagged coast, where the cliffs loomed like judges and the waves crashed like verdicts. By 10, Jacob's hands were rough as barnacles, mending nets, hauling buckets, learning the fisherman's trade before he could spell his name. His mother taught him the old ways, how to knot a rope so tight the wind couldn't unravel it, how to spot a ripple that promised fish, how to pray when the horizon turned black. But prayers don't fill nets, and the sea grew stingy. The fish fled. Some said it was a curse, others a drought beneath the waves. Jacob rode out every dawn, his boat a patchwork of planks and stubborn hope, and came back with empty hands and a heavier heart. The village watched him with pitying eyes. "He'll end like his father," they muttered, "swallowed by the deep." But Jacob wasn't built to bend. Night after night, he sat by a flickering lamp, threading nets until his fingers bled, whispering to himself that the next catch would be different. The sea tests more than your strength. It tests your soul, and Jacob's soul burned. One evening, as the wind howled like a banshee, he looked out at the brewing storm. The others stayed ashore, huddling by fires, cursing the weather. Jacob saw something else, a chance, a dare. He grabbed his oars, kissed his mother's trembling hand, and rowed into the dark. The storm hit like a fist from the gods. Waves rose like mountains, black and roaring, smashing his boat with a fury that splintered wood and hope. Jacob fought, oars useless, hands gripping the helm, water flooding his lungs. The sea doesn't bargain. It takes. A wave taller than a church steeple crashed down, and his world went silent. He sank, dragged under by currents that felt like chains, his body battered against the reef. Hours bled into eternity, maybe minutes, maybe days. When the storm finally spat him out, he woke on a rocky shore, half dead, salt caked in his hair, his boat a graveyard of wreckage scattered across the sand. Most men would have wept, cursed the sea, walked away. Jacob didn't. He crawled through the debris, coughing seawater, his eyes catching a glint, a bent piece of metal, sharp-edged and strange, gleaming in the dawn. It wasn't wood or rope. It was something foreign, something lost. A gear, maybe, or a shard of a machine swallowed long ago. He held it, turning it in his hands, and a thought struck him like lightning. The sea didn't just destroy, it hid treasures. Stories of sunken ships, galleons, traders, wrecks flooded his mind. What if the ocean wasn't his enemy, but his teacher? From that day, Jacob changed. He stopped fishing for fish and started fishing for secrets. He taught himself to dive, shallow at first, then deeper, holding his breath until his chest screamed. Every storm became a hunt. He'd swim through kelp and shadows, hauling up rusted tools, broken cogs, fragments of a world he didn't know. The village called him mad, a scavenger chasing ghosts. Jacob didn't care. He piled his finds in a shack, studying them by lamplight, piecing together what he could. One night, he fit two jagged parts together, a pulley, crude but strong. It was the first spark of something bigger, a whisper of the empire to come. Years rolled by like waves. Jacob grew older, leaner, his hands scarred but steady. That pulley became a motor, rough and rattling, but it worked, pulling nets faster than 10 men could. He tested it on his patched-up boat, and the haul was monstrous. Fish enough to feed the village for months. The whispers turned to stares, then to shouts. Fishermen who'd mocked him lined up at his door, coins in hand, begging for his machines. Jacob didn't just sell, he built. A shack became a workshop. a workshop, a factory. The sea that tried to drown him now carried his name. Decades later, Jacob stood atop a cliff, watching a fleet of steel boats. His boats sliced through the water. His machines weren't just tools, they were a revolution. Nets gave way to cranes, wood to iron. He traded with ports across the world, his wealth swelling like a tide. The boy who'd rowed a sinking boat now owned an empire. Factories, ships, a mansion carved into the cliffs where he'd once starved. He wore no silk, no gold chains, just a simple coat and that same look in his eyes, the one that defied the storm. By the end, they called him the Fisher King. Not a crown, but a title earned. He'd turned every wave that crushed him into a stepping stone, every loss into a lesson. The sea hadn't given him billions. It had forged him into a man who could take them. Jacob's story isn't a fairy tale. It's a mirror. The sea doesn't care about your birthright or your tears. It respects the ones who fight, who dive into the dark and pull out light. I've sailed those same waters, felt that same cold, and I've learned this. Wealth isn't found, it's made. I'm the billionaire fisherman, and I've got a chest full of stories like this. Tales of sunken dreams that rose to touch the stars. If you've got the grit to listen, subscribe. The tide's turning, and I'll be here waiting to guide you through.